In this module, we're going to be learning about supply and demand, how firms and individuals in a market make decisions on what products to buy, and about how those consumers' decisions impact firms. Just as a little bit of an example to start out with, this is an article from 2018. The headline is, "When supply of drugs run low, drug prices mysteriously rise, data shows." Now, hopefully by the end of this module, when supply of drugs run low, drug prices don't mysteriously rise. You'll understand exactly why drug prices will rise. Now, this module, this section, is going to have two basic ideas. The first basic idea is that consumers will buy more at a lower price, and they'll buy less at a higher price. The other basic idea is that producers will sell more at a higher price, and they'll sell less at a lower price. Now, hopefully these ideas are fairly intuitive, but they have widespread implications for what we're going to talk about throughout the rest of this course. We're going to begin our analysis this chapter on the demand side of the market. So we're going to explore where prices come from by investigating how buyers behave. So we're going to refer to this as market demand, and that is the demand by all consumers of a given good or service. So instead of looking at individuals, this will be the sum of individuals. Now, there's no fixed or objective need that's going to determine the demand. The market demand is going to depend on things like price and like some other variables, which we're going to talk about later. This slide contains both a demand schedule and a demand curve. Demand schedule is simply a table that shows the relationship between the price of a product and the quantity of that product being demanded. Next to that, on the right-hand side, we can see the demand curve. And this is a curve that shows the relationship between the price of a product and the quantity of the product demanded. You can take the information from a demand schedule showing the quantity demanded at each price and use that to draw a demand curve. Connect the points on that line, which creates the line for the demand curve itself. Given the demand schedule we have in this example and the demand curve, when we draw the demand curve, we assume that when we move from a price of $450 to $400, that the quantity is going to increase from 3 million to 4 million. This is what the demand schedule tells us. When we do that, we assume that there's nothing else changing. So we call this in economics the ceteris paribus condition, which is Latin for all else equal. The basic idea is that when we analyze the relationship between two variables, in this case between price and the quantity demanded, all the other variables must be held constant. We do this, it's a bit of a simplification, but it's so that we can understand the effect that a change in one variable has on the other variable. Now in our example here, the quantity demanded is the amount of a good or a service that a consumer is willing and able to purchase at a given price. So for instance, at a price of $350, the quantity demanded is going to be 5. You can see that both on the demand schedule, and you can see that on the demand curve. The law of demand states that when you hold everything else constant, so ceteris paribus, when the price of a product falls, the quantity demanded of the product will increase. Likewise, when the price of a product rises, the quantity demanded of a product will decrease. This should be pretty intuitive for us. We're all consumers. When things get more expensive, we're less likely to buy it, or we'll purchase less of it. Likewise, when the price goes down, we're more likely to make a purchase, or we will purchase more units of that good. What explains the law of demand? So when the price of a good falls, there's two effects taking place. The first effect is that consumers substitute toward a good whose price has fallen. So the price of one brand of canned soup goes down, and the other brands of canned soup stay the same. Consumers will substitute to that good whose the price has fallen. So that one brand whose price has fallen, consumers will purchase more of that and less of the other brands. At the same time, when the price of a good falls, consumers have more purchasing power. So it's as if they have an increase in income. So we see two effects going on. First, the substitution effect, the change in the quantity demanded of a good that results from a change in price. So this makes that good more or less expensive relative to the other goods that are substitutes. There's also the income effect. So it's the change in the quantity demanded of a good that results from the effect of a change of the good's price on the consumer's purchasing power. So again, because, for instance, if the price goes down, because the good is now relatively cheaper compared to that person's income, it's as if their income has increased. Before we go on, I should note that both the substitution effect and the income effect are occurring at the same time. So it's impossible to strip those two apart, but it's worth it to note that these are the two things that are going on. These are the two ways that people change their demand. Now moving on to the second law of demand. This is called the Allen effect, named after the two economists that discovered this. This isn't the most important thing to learn in a basic economics course, but I feel as if this really highlights the importance of opportunity cost. So the Allen effect is for two goods in the same category. So imagine we increased the cost of both goods by a fixed amount. Consumption is going to shift to the higher cost good. I know that sounds a little bit counterintuitive. You would assume that if the price of both went up, people would purchase more of the cheaper one because it's now both are more expensive. But in fact, the opposite takes place. Now, when they developed this back in the 1960s, when they were studying what was going on, they were looking at the market for cigarettes. People were just beginning to realize how unhealthy cigarettes were, so states began taxing them. So they looked at an example with a $1 tax on a pack of cigarettes. We'll use $1 to keep the math simple. Now there's two types of cigarettes in this market. There's a low quality cigarette and a high quality cigarette. So before the tax, it cost $1 for a low quality cigarette, and it costs $3 for a pack of high quality cigarettes. So now the opportunity cost of a pack of high quality cigarettes was 3 packs of low quality cigarettes. Because it was $3 for the high quality, it's only $1 for the low quality. So if you want to buy a pack of high quality cigarettes, you're giving up 3 packs of low quality cigarettes. But now we impose a $1 tax on all cigarettes. So now it costs $2 to purchase a low quality pack of cigarettes, and it costs $4 to purchase a pack of high quality cigarettes. So now the opportunity cost, what you're giving up for a high quality cigarette, is only $2 or 2 packs, of low quality cigarettes. So now, after this tax has been imposed, people are now more likely, or they're going to purchase more packs of high quality cigarettes because it's relatively less expensive. You're giving up fewer packs of low quality cigarettes in order to buy high quality cigarettes. Now, when we first talked about demand curves, we talked about a change in price moving along that demand curve. Now, if there's a change in something else other than the price that affects the demand curve, this will cause the entire demand curve to shift. So instead of moving along that same curve, we're now moving the curve to either the left or to the right. So a shift to the right, so in this example, moving from the demand curve D1 to demand curve D2, that's going to be an increase in demand. For any given price, there is going to be a greater quantity demanded. Conversely, a shift to the left, so moving from curve D1 to curve D3, is going to be a decrease in demand. So at any given price, there's going to be a lower quantity demanded. When the demand curve shifts, the quantity demanded will change even if the price doesn't change. The quantity demanded will change at every possible price. So here's an example with those same 3 demand curves. If you increase demand, again moving from demand curve 1 to demand curve 2, at P1 at this price, the quantity is going to increase from Q1 to Q2, where that price crosses the demand curve. Likewise, if the demand decreases, so the demand curve shifts from D1 to D3, at that price, P1, the quantity demanded for the first demand curve is still going to be Q1. But the quantity demanded At the new demand curve D3 is going to be Q3, much lower. So again, at the same price, if there's a decrease in demand, we're seeing a lower quantity demand. Now, what are the factors? What are these variables that I'm talking about that influence the market demand, that will cause the market demand curve to shift? There are 5 main variables. The first is income, the income of the pool of consumers. The next is the prices of related goods. So what are similar goods being sold for? The next is tastes and preferences of consumers. The fourth is the population and demographics, so the size of the potential consumer pool. And finally, the last one is the expected future prices. What are the prices of that good or service and similar goods and services going to be in the future? Next, we're going to discuss how each of these affects the demand curve specifically. The first variable that shifts the demand curve that we're going to look at is changes in the income of consumers. So, an increase in income will increase the demand for a good if the product is normal, and will decrease the demand if the product is inferior. So some example of normal goods is clothing, restaurant meals, vacations. So as you get more money, as you earn more money, as your income increases, your demand for those goods are going to increase. This is pretty much every good out there. Like, most goods fall under the category of normal goods, hence the name normal goods. But there are some goods where this is not the case. These are called inferior goods. So these are goods when your income increases, you actually buy less of. So for instance, secondhand clothing or ramen noodles. Things that maybe college kids live on ramen noodles because it's cheap and that's all they can afford. As you start to get more money, you're not going to buy more ramen noodles. You're instead going to buy more food out to eat at restaurants, or at least better food at grocery stores. So now let's compare for 2 of the goods in the same category, normal good and inferior good. So if you're looking at the demand for clothing, normal clothing, new clothing, an increase in income is going to increase the demand for clothing, all things being equal. So it's going to shift the demand curve to the right. However, that same increase in income is going to decrease an individual's demand for secondhand clothing. It's going to shift the market demand curve to the left, decreasing demand. Next is the change in prices of related goods. So substitutes, these are goods and services that can be used for the same purpose. So for example, the Big Mac and Whoppers, a Ford F-150 and a Dodge Ram, jeans and khakis. These are goods that just fill a similar need. We can also have complementary goods. These are goods and services that are used together. So for example, Big Macs and McDonald's fries, hot dogs and hot dog buns, left shoes and right shoes. When you buy one, you're going to typically purchase the other. So whereas substitutes, purchasing one will decrease the amount of the other when purchasing the other. For complementary goods, the more you purchase one, the more you're going to want to purchase the other. Now let's look at an example using the Big Mac for the effect of change of the prices of related goods. An increase in the price of Big Macs are going to increase the demand for Whoppers. So looking at the demand curve, in our model here to the right, it's going to shift the demand curve from D1 to D2, moving it to the right. Demand is going to increase because as Big Macs are more expensive, fewer people will buy Big Macs, more people will buy Whoppers. So the demand for Whoppers is going to increase. However, that same price increase for Big Macs is going to decrease the demand for McDonald's fries. That's going to shift the demand curve to the left from D1 to D2. Because it's now relatively more expensive to purchase a Big Mac, fewer people are going to purchase McDonald's fries, which are typically bought with Big Macs. The next variable is tastes and preferences. If consumers' tastes change, they may buy more of a product or less of a product. So for example, if consumers become more concerned about eating healthy, they may decrease their demand for fast food. So in this case, looking at the demand for Big Macs, the demand curve is going to shift to the left. It will decrease from demand curve D1 to D2. Conversely, if consumers' tastes change, let's say in the same way, that they're becoming more healthy, more concerned about eating healthy, they may increase their demand for a healthy alternative. So if they consider, say, Chipotle, a burrito from there, more healthy, then that will increase the demand. It will shift the demand curve to the right for Chipotle's products. Another variable that will shift the demand curve is changes in population or demographics. So demographics are the characteristics of a population with respect to things like age, race, gender, religion. There's many different ways to break down population. Increases in the number of people buying something will increase the amount demanded. So if the population as a whole increases, that will tend to increase the amount demanded. Now, if a certain demographic within a population increases or decreases, this will function the same way. So, for instance, if there's an increase in the elderly population, this will tend to increase the demand for medical care. So, the demand curve will shift from D1 to D2. It will shift to the right for medical care. Likewise, if the population as a whole increases, we would expect the demand for medical care to increase as well. It will also shift to the right. Finally, the last variable that we're going to cover that shifts the demand curve is changes in expectations about future prices. Consumers decide which products to buy, but they also decide when to purchase them. So if you think about it, future products are substitutes for current products. You can buy something today, or you can wait a week and buy it then. An expected increase in the price tomorrow is going to increase demand today. Conversely, an expected decrease in the price tomorrow decreases demand today. And this should be pretty intuitive. If you know the price is going to increase and you plan on buying it tomorrow, then instead of waiting for the price to increase, you'll purchase it now and save the money. By the same token, if you expect the price is going to drop at the end of the week, say there's going to be a sale at the end of the week, then you're not going to purchase it today if you don't need it today. You'll be willing to wait until the end of the week so you can save money. So now, for example, if you found out that the price of gasoline was going to go up tomorrow, it would increase your demand today. You fill up today before the price goes up. So looking at the demand curve in the figure there on the right, the demand curve will increase from D1 to D2, shifting to the right. Before we finish this section, I want to make sure that we have the vocabulary right, that we're using the proper words to describe this. So we'll look at a change in demand versus a change in the quantity demanded. A change in the price of a product that we're examining causes a movement along the demand curve. This is the change in the quantity demanded. So in this, in the figure on the right, look at demand curve D1. So it's the demand curve on the left. If the price drops from $450 to $400, we're going to move from point A on the demand curve to point B on the demand curve. So the quantity demanded is going to increase from 3 to 4. In this case, units are millions of smartwatches per week. So it will increase from 3 to 4 million smartwatches. This is a movement along the demand curve, or a change in the quantity demanded. There hasn't been a change in any of the variables that will shift the demand curve. So now, on the other hand, a change in demand, this is any other change affecting demand. This will cause the entire demand curve to shift. So this is not a change in price. This is a change in, say, taste and preferences, or future prices, or demographics. This is going to move the entire demand curve to the right, so moving from D1 to D2. This is called a change in demand. So at $450, the price is staying the same, so it's still at $450. We're moving from point A on the first demand curve, D1, so that's 3 million units. When the demand curve shifts out to D2 and the price stays the same, we're going to stay along that price to where it intersects the demand curve, so that will be point C, 5 million smartwatches per week. This is the difference between a change in the quantity demanded, movement along the demand curve, and a change in demand, or a shift in the demand curve.